The story will be told from the perspective of the main female character. The applause began before I fully processed what she had just announced. My mother stood beneath the bright lights of the party, holding a stack of papers high so everyone could see them. Her face was glowing with pride as she spoke loudly to the room. "We're giving this house to them." Instantly, the guests burst into cheers. My sister started crying almost immediately, and my father's grin stretched wide across his face. Meanwhile, I remained seated where I was. I gripped my glass so tightly it felt unusually heavy in my hand. Not one person glanced in my direction. Not a single person seemed to remember that I had been the one taking care of that house for the past 6 years. I told myself to stay calm. I forced myself to breathe slowly. I even tried to hold a polite smile while staying in my chair, but the moment my mother lowered those papers back down, something inside me shifted. It was a quiet change, sharp and sudden, and I could already tell it wasn't going to stay quiet for long. For most of my life, I believed helping your parents was simply something responsible adults did. You didn't expect applause or praise. You just stepped in when needed and made it part of everyday life. That whole situation had started 6 years earlier. My father's work hours had been cut, and my mother's hands had become so stiff with pain that turning a steering wheel was nearly impossible. They couldn't keep up with the mortgage anymore. I didn't hesitate. I sat down at my computer, logged into my bank account, and set up an automatic payment. The first month hurt financially. The second month felt like an obligation. After half a year passed, I barely thought about it. It became background noise. Every 30 days, my phone would chime with the same payment alert. No one ever called to thank me. We didn't discuss it at family dinners. Occasionally, my mother would say how lucky they were to still have their home. I would simply nod. I never told her that their luck actually had my name attached to it, along with my bank routing number. This pattern of being overlooked had existed long before I started paying their bills. When I graduated from college, my parents handed me a small envelope during breakfast. Inside was a card and a bill for $65. My mother said they were proud of me. My father squeezed my shoulder briefly. I wasn't expecting anything extravagant. By then, I had already learned not to expect much at all. My role in the family had become clear. I was the dependable one, the person everyone relied on. 3 years later, my sister graduated. My parents hosted a huge celebration in the backyard. Strings of lights hung between the trees, music blasted from rented speakers, and relatives filled the lawn. At the end of the evening, my father raised a set of car keys into the air. The sunlight caught the metal, making it flash brightly. "Your new car is parked out front," he told her. The crowd erupted with excitement. My sister burst into tears and hugged him tightly. I clapped along with everyone else, pretending the heavy feeling in my chest wasn't there. She had always been the center of attention, the funny one, the charming one, the one people gathered around. I was the one behind the scenes, the planner, the cook, the person who fixed problems before anyone even noticed them. My mother used to tell people I didn't need much attention, as if it were a compliment, but sometimes it felt like she believed wanting nothing meant I deserved nothing. As the years went by, the difference between my sister and me only grew more obvious. She bounced between hobbies, switched careers more than once, and dated a string of different men. My parents called her constantly morning and night. If she missed a deadline, they stepped in. If she ran out of money, they sent more. If she cried, everything stopped until someone helped her. Meanwhile, when I was covering their mortgage payments or canceling my own vacations just to keep saving money, I kept quiet. They never bragged about me to relatives. They never checked in to see how I was managing. I was like a support beam holding up a building that didn't even belong to me. Often you don't recognize the moment when things truly change. Some turning points are so subtle that they pass unnoticed. For me, it happened that afternoon in the yard when my sister held those car keys up and everyone applauded. That was when I finally understood my place in the family. I wasn't angry yet, but I finally saw things clearly. About 3 months after the wedding, life started feeling normal again. I tried convincing myself that the announcement about the house was just another situation I could ignore. Then my sister invited us to dinner. She texted me saying it would be simple, just family. My husband and I drove up to the house, which now technically belonged to her. The porch light glowed warmly against the dark evening sky. Through the window, I saw my mother hanging up new curtains. They were cream-colored, replacing the blue ones she had used for years. My sister's voice drifted from the kitchen, cheerful and relaxed, as if she had always lived there. When we stepped inside, the table was already set. Dinner was pot roast with fresh rolls, and a game played quietly on the television in the next room. My father greeted my husband with a friendly slap on the back. When he looked at me, his smile felt forced. I sat where they directed me, between my husband and my father. It was our usual seating arrangement, but something had changed. The house was no longer my parents' home, and it certainly wasn't mine. It belonged to the two people they had chosen. Dinner conversations stayed light. People talked about the Hawaii trip and possible paint colors. My sister animatedly described her plan to build a fire pit in the yard, something she'd always wanted. Her hands moved wildly as she spoke, full of excitement. My mother watched her with admiration, as though nothing else in the world mattered. When we finished eating, my mother clasped her hands together and glanced toward my father. It was a signal. My stomach tightened. "There's something we wanted to talk to you about," she began gently, her tone carefully rehearsed. "Your father and I have been thinking about our next step." My father nodded in agreement. "Since the house belongs to them now," he said, "we need somewhere quieter to stay." My mother inhaled deeply, like someone finally revealing a long-planned idea. "We've decided we're going to move into your vacation house." She said it casually, like she was discussing weekend plans. There was no question, no request. The decision had already been made. The room fell silent. My sister stared down at her plate. My husband shifted slightly in his chair, waiting to see how I would react. I carefully placed my fork down beside my plate so it lined up perfectly with the edge. My hands remained steady. I took a slow breath. Inside, something familiar cracked open. But this time I wasn't surprised. I simply saw the truth. They had already decided where I belonged in their lives. They always had. "No," I said, just one word, soft but unmovable. My mother blinked. "What?" she asked. "You're not moving into my house," I replied. The room froze. My chair scraped lightly against the floor as I stood up from the table. I stepped away from the warmth of the dinner and walked toward the door. Behind me, the chair stayed exactly where it was. Only a moment earlier, someone had been sitting there. Now it was undeniably empty. The drive home was quiet, but it wasn't the fragile kind of silence that feels like it might shatter. It felt steady in my chest. Something inside me had finally stopped bending for them. My husband didn't question me right away. He never does. One hand stayed on the steering wheel while the other rested near mine. He sat close enough that I could reach out if I needed to, but I didn't, not yet. Right then, silence was what I needed most. When we arrived home, I hung my coat up, slipped off my shoes, and walked straight into the bathroom. I turned on the tap, cupped the cold water in my hands, and pressed it against my face. Then I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked calm, almost too calm. My eyes were dry and my jaw felt tight. It was the stillness that comes after swallowing years of storms. I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. Instead, I grabbed a towel, dried my face, and walked to my desk. The desk lamp cast a small pool of light across the wood surface. My laptop sat in the center. Waiting, I opened it. The first thing I did was block their phone numbers. It wasn't done out of anger. It was necessary. Every time I tried setting a boundary with my parents, the same cycle repeated itself. I would say no, they would get upset, I would feel guilty. Eventually, they would apologize and then act like the whole conversation had never happened. I couldn't keep spinning in that circle. I opened my contacts, selected their numbers, and pressed block. The soft clicking sound of the keys was barely noticeable, but it felt final. Next, I checked the security system for the vacation house. I opened the app and saw the familiar map along with the camera view of the front porch. The system was already active. Still, I tightened everything. I created a new passcode, enabled two-step verification, and increased the sensitivity of the motion alerts. Their old access permissions were removed. Then I arranged for every notification to go directly to both my phone and my husband's so nothing could slip past us unnoticed. After that, I opened a folder on my computer labeled Documents. Inside were 6 years of house payments I had made for them. It wasn't a complex list, just simple monthly records and receipts for the transfers. I had also written some short notes on the sides of the pages. When my parents used to call me because they needed help, I didn't read these. I didn't have to. The dates showed the whole story. They showed a pattern and the truth. I picked the whole folder, made it a smaller file, and saved it where I could find it fast. I wasn't going to use it to fight them. I just wanted to keep myself honest. I needed to remind myself that none of this was just in my head. My husband was leaning against the doorway, watching me quietly. "Do you want to talk?" he asked. "Not yet," I told him. He just nodded and walked back into the living room. He didn't sigh or act like I hurt his feelings. He just gave me space, which was exactly what I needed. I opened a new page on my computer. It wasn't for revenge, it was just to see everything clearly. I made a list of every single bill I had paid for my parents. I wrote down the months I covered their costs when they couldn't do it. I wrote down the times I changed my own schedule, my own budget, and my own plans. I didn't do it to count what they owed me. I did it to witness it myself. I typed it out line by line, and the numbers looked very plain and simple. When I was done, I closed the file. I didn't even save it. Around midnight, I went to the window. The lights of the city were glowing far away. They looked soft and blurry, like someone had smeared gold paint across the sky. I could hear the cars driving below, a steady sound coming through the glass. It reminded me that the world keeps moving even when you finally stop doing what people want. My husband came over and put a cup of warm tea on the windowsill. His fingers touched mine. "Are you okay?" he whispered. "I think so," I said. We stood there for a long time. We didn't talk. We just breathed at the same speed. For the first time in months, I felt like I was actually standing on solid ground. The next morning, I woke up and my head felt very clear. I took a shower, tied my hair back, and got dressed for my job. Every move I made felt careful and important, like I was changing on the inside. Before I walked out, I stopped at the drawer near the front door. I opened it slowly. Inside, I saw a ring of keys. There was the spare for my apartment, my office key, and the one for the vacation house. I picked up the vacation house key. The metal was cold and the edges felt sharp. This small piece of steel represented 6 years of me being responsible and keeping quiet while my hard work was ignored. I squeezed it in my hand until it left a mark on my palm. Then I put it back in the drawer very gently, almost like a ceremony. At work, everything seemed louder and sharper. I could hear the keyboards clicking and the printers humming. I sat at my desk and focused on my projects better than I had in a long time. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a message from a number I didn't know. I didn't even open it, I just deleted it. I knew that my new rules would only work if I kept them. The rest of the day went by like a normal day should. When I got home, my husband Ryan was sitting on the couch reading. I sat down next to him and closed my eyes. My shoulders felt relaxed. The quiet in the house didn't feel like something was missing anymore. It just felt like I had my own space. A boundary is not like a wall, it is just a shape or a line you draw for yourself. That night, I checked my security app again. Everything was locked and quiet. I turned off the lamp. I wasn't going to fix the things they broke anymore. The phone call came on a Wednesday morning while I was in the middle of a meeting. My phone buzzed once and then again on the table. I thought it might be a message from Ryan, but it was a number I didn't recognize. I went out into the hallway to answer it. A police officer told me he was at my vacation house. He said there were 2 people there who said they were my parents. They had used a key to get inside and the alarm system flagged them. He asked if I could come to the property. I found Ryan at his desk, grabbed my coat, and told him they were at the house. He grabbed his keys and we left. The drive out of the city was very long and quiet. When we turned onto the gravel road, I saw the police car. Its lights were not flashing. 2 officers were standing by the porch. My parents were sitting on the steps next to 3 old suitcases that didn't match. My mother looked at me and seemed happy. She didn't look guilty. She looked like she expected me to fix everything. She stood up and told me to tell the police that everything was fine and that they were allowed to be there. The officer asked me if they were really my parents. I told him yes, but I also told him they did not have permission to stay there. My mother looked very upset. My father stood up and brushed some dust off his clothes. He sounded annoyed when he said they didn't break in and that they just used the key I gave them. I told him that key was only for emergencies, not for moving into the house. The officer said they could take them away to the station. He asked me if I wanted to press charges for trespassing, but I said no. I just told him they couldn't stay. My mother got very angry. She told me I was unbelievable after everything they had done for me. Ryan stood near me so I would know I wasn't alone. The police led my parents to the car, and their suitcases stayed on the porch like things they had forgotten. A locksmith came by a little later and changed all the locks. He gave me the new keys and they felt solid in my hand. After the police car drove away, the house was quiet again. I locked the door myself and left. The next morning, I felt very light. I made some coffee and watched the sun come up over the city. My cousin Sarah called me later that day. She spoke carefully. She told me that my parents went back to my sister's house, but my sister would not let them in. Now, my parents were living in a small apartment on the edge of town. My mother had to get a full-time job to pay for their bills. That evening, my phone buzzed again with a voicemail from my mother. Her voice sounded very small. She said they made mistakes and wanted to talk. I didn't listen to the whole thing, but I didn't delete it either. Some people need time before you can forgive them. I sat at my desk and looked at my vacation house on a rental website. The pictures showed the sun shining in the windows and the clean floors. It felt good to look at it and know it was mine to do whatever I wanted with. I finished the listing and closed my computer. Sometimes being free doesn't mean making a lot of noise. It just means you aren't being used for the wrong reasons anymore. I finally drew a line for myself, and the quiet that followed was the best part. If you have ever had to find your own peace from the ground up, you are not alone.